Okay, but that's just a little piece of the whole thing. So let's now get to the old economy, because the old economy is a very important part of this as well. Right now we have 5.1 consumer prices. Dullsville. It's an index. Often the indexes are dull. The interesting thing is the change in the index, right? Joanne, the increase in the index. That's what's interesting. So if you hit next, voila. Now it's interesting. And this is the change in the consumer price index. Now, well, what's the most dramatic thing about this? The most dramatic thing about it is it went up from 1950 to 1980 and down ever since. Now, this is the rate of change, right? It's not the consumer price index itself, it's the rate of change. But in other words, between 1950 and 1980, was inflation getting more worse or less worse? More. And between 1980 and now, was inflation getting, or has inflation become more worse or less worse? Less worse. Everybody see that? Clear. Okay, now, notice something else. Notice how the inflation would spike, and then when recession would hit, inflation would moderate. But then during the next expansion, the inflation would go up higher than it had been before, and during the next recession, it would fall to a point that was higher than it had been before. So, in other words, we would continuously break through to new ground. The peaks higher and the troughs higher, and so if the peaks are higher and the troughs are higher, what's the trend? Does everybody see that? Now, keep that in mind, and this is going to tax you a little, but just keep that in mind. And now, for instance, take a look at the short-term interest rates. What's the first thing that hits your eye? The first thing that hits your eye is it looked an awful lot like the change in prices, didn't it? In other words, a peak in 1980, then it fell away, right? And even the cyclical behavior looks very similar, doesn't it? Yeah. Now, why would interest rates behave like the change in prices? Because no one's going to lend at a rate of interest which is less than the rate of inflation, right? I mean, if prices are going up at 10% a year, you've got to get at least a 10% rate of interest. Otherwise, people will be repaying an amount that is less in real terms than the amount you loaned them. And who will do that voluntarily? No one would do that voluntarily. So the point is, the rate of inflation is going to set the floor, isn't it? All right, so now we'll put it all together.